1.8. Okay, so this is going to be on, we're going to be dividing these polynomials. Okay, so we're going to be dividing actually several terms by a 2-term polynomial. So before we get into the actual work, let's just go over the steps that we learned way back when about long division. Okay, when you are doing long division, like this, just a regular old long division problem. Remember, the first thing you do is you look at this number and you're deciding how many times, since it doesn't go into 5, right? 7's too big to go into 5. So we're actually looking at the 52. Okay, so 7, how many times does 7 go into 52? Let's see, 7 times 7 is 49. 7 times 8 is 56, which is too big. So that's why we'll use the 7. Now, here's the reason I wanted to do this, just to remind ourselves what happens next in the process of long division. The next step is to multiply whatever you put here times the number that's out here and put your answer here. So I have 7 times 7, which gives me 49. Now, what was the next step in long division? What was the process that you did here? You subtracted that. So I'm going to do 52 minus 49. That gives me 3. What was the next thing you did? You brought down the next number. So I'm bringing down the 6. And then you started the process all over again. Okay, so again, we always, once we put the number up here, we did that number times this one, put our answer here, and then subtracted and dropped down the next number, and then started all over. So 7 goes into 36. Let's see, 5 times 7 gives me 35, and then subtract again. 6 minus 5 gives me 1, drop down the next number. 7 goes into 15, 2 times 7 is 14, and subtract to get 1. Since we've already brought down that last number, there's nothing else to bring down. That number was called your remainder. Okay, so let's use these rules to help us do this long division for this section. So I've got x squared minus x minus 30 over x minus 6. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite this in the long division format. Okay, so this number, whatever is your denominator, that's what you're dividing by. So what you're dividing by comes out here. The numerator comes underneath the division symbol. So I have x minus 6 goes into x squared minus x minus 30. So the first step, you'll notice you've got these two terms out here. What you're going to do is you're trying to see how many times x goes into x squared. Let's make that easier on ourselves. Whatever this first term is, put it over this first term. So I have x squared over x. So remember, when you're dividing, you're going to subtract exponents, right? So if you have x squared over x, what is that going to leave you with? just an x, right? Because if I subtract my exponents, I would get x to the first power, which is just x. That is what comes right here. So again, you put this first term over this first term. We kind of did it over to the side here. When you do that division, that's what you're going to put there. Now, here's why I did the whole previous problem to remind us of these steps. What is the step I do now with this term that I put up here? I multiply it times whatever's out here and put my answer here, just like I did on that last one. I did that 7 times 7 and put the 49 down here. I'm going to do the same thing here. It's just that I have this x has to go to both of those since there's two terms out here. So let's see. X times x gives me x squared. X times negative 6. So negative 6 times x gives me negative 6x. Now, what did I do when I had that 52 and 49 right here? I subtracted, right? That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to subtract those terms from the terms above them. So x squared minus x squared goes away, right? If you have x squared and you subtract it, you're left with nothing. So now what do I have? Here I've got negative, that's a negative 1x. This turns this, since I'm subtracting negative 6x, this really says negative 1x. That turns that into plus 6x, right? So if I have negative 1 plus 6, that leaves me with 5x. Just like the last problem, drop down the next part. So I'm dropping down the minus 30. And then I start all over, just like I did at the beginning. Whatever this first term is, put it over this first term. So this first term is a 5x. I put it over this first term, which is x. So what is that going to leave me with? Those x's cancel, so I'm just left with a positive 5. That's what goes here, positive 5. I do the multiplication. 5 times x gives me 5x. 5 times negative 6 gives me negative 30. If these are exactly the same, we're not going to have a remainder, right? Because think about if you're subtracting this, 5x minus 5x is nothing. And what's this? Negative 30. This turns that into positive 30. So negative 30 plus 30, you're not left with anything. So there just is no remainder, which means that's your answer to the problem, x plus 5. Okay, let's do another one. Number 2, we have 6x squared minus 7x minus 10. Over x minus 2. So let's rewrite this as long division. Remember, your denominator is what comes out here. So x minus 2 comes out here. Your numerator is what comes underneath here. So 6x squared minus 7x minus 10. Now, remember, the step is you want to know how much x goes into 6x squared. So how did we simplify that part for ourselves? Whatever this first term is, 6x squared, put it over this first term and simplify it. So I'm putting it over x, and then I'm going to simplify it. So let's see. If I divide this by x, remember, if I subtract those exponents, what am I going to be left with? I'm still going to have the 6, right? There's nothing to divide the 6 by. If I had x squared, but I divided it by x, I am left with just the x. So this right here, when I did that over here, this 6x is what comes right here. Now remember, the rules of long division say whatever you put here, multiply it times both of these and put your answer here. So let's see, I've got 6x times x, which gives me 6x squared. 6x times -2 gives me -12x. And then what do? Subtract all that. So let's see, 6x squared minus 6x squared. So that's gone. That should always happen. So no x squareds anymore. Now remember, what does this minus turn this into? It actually turns it into a plus, right? If I'm subtracting a negative, I'm really adding. So I have -7x plus 12x, which gives me 5x. And then I'll drop down the next part, -10, and start over. Now, remember, I got to find the next part that comes up here. So whatever this first term is, put it over this first term. So I put it over x. So when I divide that, those x's cancel. So I'm just left with a +5. So that's what comes up here, +5. Multiply this times both of these and put your answer down here. So I've got +5 times x, which is 5x. +5 times -2 is -10. So remember, there's nothing left to bring down. I'm at the end of the problem. And if these two things are exactly the same, that just means you don't have a remainder, right? Because if you subtract all that, you're going to have 0 left. So 6x plus 5 would be your answer. Right, number 3. X squared minus 17x plus 72 divided by x minus 9. So they wrote it a little different. Okay, I can still work this as long division. Whatever you're dividing by comes out here. This is what comes underneath. So I've got x squared minus 17x plus 72. So once again, whatever this first term is, put it over this first term. So I'm putting it over x. X squared over x. If I subtract my exponents, I'm just left with x. That's what comes up here. Multiply x times x is x squared. X times -9 gives me -9x. And then remember, you are subtracting here. So I have x squared minus x squared, so the x squareds are gone. Again, this minus turns this minus into a plus. So this really says negative 17 plus 9. If you're not okay with that, just type that in your calculator, negative 17 plus 9. That's going to give me negative 8 x's. Drop down my plus 72. And then start all over. Remember, to get what comes up next here, whatever this first term is, which is negative 8x, put it over this, so putting it over the x. Simplify it. Those x's cancel, so this time, what are you left with? Negative 8. So that's what comes here. Multiply this times both of these. Put your answers here. So negative 8 times x gives me negative 8x. Negative 8 times negative 9 is positive 72. So once again, if these are exactly the same, you do not have a remainder. So x minus 8 is your answer. Next one. (12x to the third) minus 19x squared minus 45x minus 18. Put that all over 4x plus 3. So again, remember, you can turn this into long division. Whatever your denominator is what comes out here. So my denominator is 4x plus 3. So I'll put that out here. Your numerator comes under the division symbol. So I've got 12x to the third minus 19x squared minus 45x minus 18. Right, so this one's a little bit longer. We're just going to do the same steps though. Remember, your first step is always put whatever this first term is, which is 12x to the third, over whatever this first term is, because that's what's going to give you your first term up here in your answer. So I'm putting that 12x to the third over 4x. And then simplifying it. Let's see, 12 over 4 gives me 3. X to the third over x to the first. If you subtract those exponents, you're going to get x to the second. So that's going to be the first thing that comes up here. Whatever you get right here is what you're going to put here. So 3x to the second. Multiply this times both of these and put your answer here. So let's see, the first thing I have is 3x squared times 4x. So let's see, the 3 times the 4 gives me 12. X squared x gives me x to the third. Then I got to do it times the 3. So 3x squared times positive 3 gives me positive 9x squared. And then subtract. So 12x cubed minus 12x cubed goes away. Now remember, I'm subtracting. So this time, what does this minus turn this into? It turns it into a minus. So I've got, and if you want to put it in your calculator, what do I need to tell my calculator I'm trying to do here? I need to say -19. This turns this into -9. So again, just in your home screen, just type it in. -19 -9. So that'll give me -28. So drop this down. That's -28 x squared. Remember, drop down the next part. So I'm dropping down the -45x. And then starting all over the process again. Whatever this first term is, -28x squared. You're going to put it over this first term to get the next thing that comes up here. So I'm putting it over 4x and then simplifying it. So -28 divided by 4 gives me -7x squared over x to the first. If you subtract those exponents, you'll just have an x. So let's see. When I did that division, that's the next thing that comes over here. So I'm going to have a -7x. -7x times both of these. So -7x times 4x gives me -28x squared, right? Now I have -7x times +3, which gives me -21x. And then I'll subtract that. So let's see. I'm subtracting, so that turns that into a plus 28x squared, which just knocks out the -28x squared. It also turns this into a plus. So what do I need to tell my calculator now? I need to tell my calculator -45. That turns that to plus 21. So -45 plus 21 gives me -24. So this right here, -45x plus 21x gives me -24x. I'm still not done, right? I still have another thing to drop down. So I'm dropping down to -18. All right, so last step. What's the step always? When you get to this point, you're going to put this first term, which is -24x, over this first term, +4x, and simplify it. -24 divided by 4 gives me -6, and my x's would cancel. So all I'm left with right there is that -6, and that's what comes here. -6 times +4 gives me -24x. -6 times +3 is -18. If I subtract that, again, if these are both exactly the same, that just means there's not going to be a remainder. So this minus turns that to plus 24x, which knocks that one out. This minus turns this into plus 18, which just knocks that one out. So there is no remainder, which means that is your answer. Okay, I'm going to pause it for just a second. Okay, so let's see, does this one work out? Let's see if I turn this into long division. Your denominator comes out here, so x plus 1. Your numerator is what comes under here. So 3x squared plus 4x minus 7. This first term goes over this first term. So 3x squared over x. simplify it. Let's see. I'll have the 3, right? Nothing to divide the 3 by. X squared over x leaves you with x. That's what comes up here. What do you do with this? You multiply it times both of these and put your answer here. So 3x times x gives me 3x squared. 3x times positive 1 gives me positive 3x. Then subtract that. 3x squared minus 3x squared is nothing. This turns this into minus, right? So I have 4x minus 3x, which is just leaving me with 1x. Bring down the minus 7 and start all over. So let's see. I put this first term over this first term. What is that going to leave you? What is x over x? It is positive 1.
Hey, your thing, it's supposed to be minus, oh, never mind. I did it wrong. My bad.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Because I had did negative 4x.
Oh. Actually, you're just going to get a different, you're working a different problem, so you're going to get a different answer, but the problem that you're working is actually going to be correct. If you put a
Yes,
4x there, you're doing the problem that you are working, you're going to do it fine. Yeah. So I'm going to be a +1 up here. And then multiply both of these. 1 times x gives me x. What happened? Did I write this right? Maybe you did right. Is this how y'all did it? 1 times 1 gives me positive 1. I feel like, hang on, let me pause. I feel like I wrote something wrong, so it really wasn't necessary. But yeah, this one would have a remainder if you worked it like this. Your x's would go away, but what does this turn this into? A minus, so I have -7 minus 1, which just gives me a remainder on this one, which is fine. It just wasn't really necessary because none of our problems in this section are going to have remainders. Okay. So Lauren, I actually liked your problem better. Okay. Now, moving on to number 5, we do have something different. We've got x to the 4th minus 6x squared minus 7. Divided by x squared minus 7. Now, before we turn this into long division, all of the other problems that we have worked, if they started here with an x squared, the next term was x, and then the constant. If it started with x to the 4th, the exponents went down from there. So you would have seen an x to the 3rd term in here, then the x squared, then an x, and then this minus 7. So what I need to do before I start this is fill in for those missing terms. So any term that is missing, I'm going to plug it in and put a 0 in front of it. So in other words, if I start with x to the 4th, and I don't have as x to the 3rd, I'm going to plug in a 0 x to the 3rd. I don't want to have any missing terms when I'm doing this long division. So do I have an x squared? I do. So I can use this right here. So minus 6x squared. What should come after the squared before the constant? An x. So I'm going to plug, I don't have an x, so I'm just going to plug in a 0x. And then the minus 7. So again, I want my exponents to go 4, 3, 2, 1, none. So plug in zeros for all the missing ones. Same thing here. If I start with x squared, before this constant, I need to have an x. So I'm just going to plug in a 0x and then the minus 7. So what was in the second part, that's what comes out here. X squared plus 0x minus 7. This part comes in here, so I have x to the 4th plus 0x to the 3rd minus 6x squared plus 0x minus 7. So start off the same way. Whatever your first term is here, put it over your first term here. So I've got x to the 4th. I'm going to put it over x squared. And simplify that to see what my first term up here is going to be. So if I subtract my exponents, I'm going to be left with x squared. So x squared is what will come here. And what do you do with that? I'm going to multiply it by all of these and put all of them down here. So let's see, x squared times x squared gives me x to the 4th. X squared times 0x. So let's see, that's going to give me 0. X squared and x gives me x to the 3rd. And then the last one, x squared times -7 gives me -7 x squared, and then I'm going to subtract this. Let's see, my x to the 4ths are gone. My x to the 3rds are gone, right? 0 minus 0 gives me 0, so I don't even have any x to the 3rds. What is this minus? That turns this into a plus. So let's see, I've got -6x squared. That turns that into plus 7x squared. So -6 plus 7 gives me 1x squared. Drop down my 0x. Now, you're going to find out on this next step that you could actually drop down the -7 also. Let me show that you would figure that out. What's your next step? Your next step would be to put, remember, whatever is over here, to put these over each other. So this term right here, over your first term out here. So x squared over x squared. What is that going to give you? Anything over itself is +1. So +1 is what's going to come here. Look what happens. 1 times x squared is x squared. 1 times 0x, so that's going to give me 0x. But look what I also have. I still have 1 times -7, which is -7, which means I could have gone ahead and dropped down this -7 on the last step, because look what's left. Are these exactly the same? Yes, which means no remainder, so your answer is x squared plus 1. All right, number 6 is a lot like this one. X to the 4th, x to the 4th minus 16 divided by x squared plus 4. So I'm going to turn this into long division and fill in for any missing terms at the same time. So remember, your denominator is what will come out here. So let's see, this will come out here, so I'll have x squared. What should come after the x squared before that plus 4? If you have an x squared, you want to have an x. So fill in for the x with a 0x. And then the plus 4. The numerator comes in here, filling in for missing terms. So if I start with x to the 4th, then I should have an x to the 3rd. So 0x to the 3rd. After x to the 3rd would be x squared. I don't have any of those either. So plus 0x squared. After x squared should come x's. I don't have any of those either. Then the minus 16. Remember, start off this first term over this first term. So I have x to the 4th over x squared. Simplify that. X to the 4th over x squared is x squared. Then multiply x squared times x squared gives me x to the 4th. X squared times 0x. So since it's 0, I'll just have 0x cubes. X squared times positive 4. So that's going to give me positive 4x squared. And then I'll subtract all this. My x to the 4ths are gone. My x to the 3rds are gone. So what does this turn this into? So I have 0x squared. This minus turns that into a negative. So 0 minus 4 gives me negative 4x squared. And I'm going to bring both of these down, like on the last one. To find out what comes up here, remember, whatever this is, so negative 4x squared, put it over this first term, which is x squared. And then simplify that. So your x squareds cancel. So all I'm left with is the negative 4, and that's what comes here. Multiply this negative 4 times all 3 of these terms and put your answer down there. So negative 4x squared. Negative 4 times 0, so you have 0 x's. Negative 4 times positive 4 gives me negative 16. So once again, all these are exactly the same, which means there is no remainder. So x squared minus 4 is your answer. All right, the last 2 are word problems, but we're just going to turn them into long division, and they'd be exactly like what we've been doing. All right, so it gives me a rectangle. It tells me the width is 5x plus 3. And it tells me the area is 5x to the 3rd plus 8x squared minus 22x minus 15. And it wants to know what is this length. This is the area of the whole rectangle. Here's my width, 5x plus 3. It wants to know what the length is. So let's think about this first before we do anything. The area of a rectangle is whatever the length is times the width. What do you not know? I know the area and I know the width. What I don't know is this length. So let's think about this. If I wanted to turn this equation around to say L equals. I need to get rid of this times W, so the L will be by itself. How do you undo times W? You have to divide by W. If I do it to that side, I'd have to do it to this side. Those cancel. So my length is going to be equal to whatever the area is, divided by the width. Right? I don't know what the length is, but I do know what both of these things are. What is the area? The area is 5x cubed plus 8x squared minus 22x minus 15. What's the width? What told me the width right here? 5x plus 3. So now you can see why this problem is in this section. Once I turn this equation around to have what I'm looking for, which is the L all by itself, and then when I filled in what I knew for the area and the width, look what it turned into. The problems I've been working. So let's work it now, long division wise. Your denominator, 5x plus 3, comes out here. Your numerator comes under your division symbol. So 5x to the third plus 8x squared minus 22x minus 15. And then work this long division. First things first, whatever this term is, put it over this first term. So I have 5x to the third over 5x. So my 5's cancel. I've got x to the third over x to the first. So if I subtract those exponents, I'll have x squared. So that's what's the first thing that's going to come up here is the x squared. Multiply it. X squared times both of these. So x squared times 5x, right? That's going to give me 5x to the third. X squared times positive 3 gives me positive 3x squared, and then subtract. So let's see, my x to the thirds are gone. This minus turns that into subtraction, right? So I've got 8 minus 3, so that gives me 5x squared, and drop down the next thing. So I'm dropping down the minus 22x. Start all over. Put 5x squared over 5x. Fives cancel, x squared over x leaves me with 1x. So that's the next thing that comes up here. So a positive x multiplied. X times 5x gives me 5x squared. X times positive 3 gives me positive 3x. And then subtract. So let's see, my x squareds are gone. This turns this into a negative, right? So I've got negative 22 minus 3. If you're at negative 22 degrees and you drop down 3 more, where are you at? Now you're at negative 25. X, drop down the next thing, minus 15. All right, last thing. First term here, so negative 25x. Put it over the first term here, 5x. So let's see, negative 25 divided by 5 gives me negative 5. And my x's cancel. So that's my last thing that comes up here, minus 5. and multiply. Negative 5 times both of these. So negative 5 times positive 5x gives me negative 25x. Negative 5 times positive 3 gives me negative 15. And since these are, again, exactly the same, there is no remainder. So this is your answer. X squared plus x minus 5 is the length. Now, also on this, it's going to ask you, so you'll put your answer here. X squared, whatever it was, plus x minus 5. Now, here, it's going to give you a drop down. The drop down is going to say square units or just units. Okay? When you're talking about the length or the width, it's just units. Right? We don't need square units. Squared is what the area is. The area is something squared. Just the length or the width, it's just plain units. All right, last one, number 8. All right, if the distance traveled is 5b to the third minus 5b squared.
We can't see the top of the board.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So there's the distance traveled, and the rate is b plus 4. So distance traveled is that. The rate is b plus 4. Write an expression in hours for the time traveled. So before we get into anything else, let's write what, I guess they just assume that you're going to know what these formulas are. Okay? Distance is going to always be equal to the rate times the time. So the distance you travel is going to depend on how fast you're going and how long you're traveling. So it tells me this is the distance, this is the rate you're traveling. It wants to know how long you've been traveling. So it doesn't know the t. But remember, so this is what I want by itself, because if I solve what t is, I'm going to have my answer. So let's get the formula right first. I need to get rid of this times r by dividing by r. That'll get my t by itself. And if I have t by itself, after I fill in what I know, I should have my answer. So t is equal to the distance divided by the rate. So let's see, my distance, I do know that. It's 5b to the third minus 5b squared plus 2b plus 408. And I also know the rate is b plus 4. So let's set up our long division with that. I'll set it up and then I'll pause and I'll let y'all work it. So the denominator comes out here, so b plus 4. The numerator is what comes into here. So 5b to the third minus 5b squared plus 2b plus 408. Okay, so I will pause it and let y'all have a go at it. Okay, so let's see. The first thing I have is 5b to the third, so I need to put it over b to see what's going to be my first thing up top. 5b to the third over b. So whatever's here over this first term. So let's see, I'll still have the 5. b to the third over b. If I subtract those exponents, I will have b squared. So 5b squared is the first thing that comes here. 5b squared times b gives me 5b to the third. Remember, this is always going to happen. 5b to the squared, 5b squared times positive 4 gives me positive 20b squared. And then subtract it. My b cubes are gone. Remember, this minus turns that into negative. So I'll have negative 5 minus 20. So negative 5 minus 20 gives me negative 25 b squareds. Then drop down your next thing, which is a plus 2b. And then start over. Whatever your first term is here, so negative 25b squared. Put it over your first term, which again is b. So let's see. I don't have anything to divide the negative 25 by, so I'll have negative 25. B squared over b is b. So I've got negative 25b up top. Multiply negative 25b times b gives me negative 25b squared. Negative 25 times positive 4 gives me negative 100b. This is why I told you not to be worried about if your numbers were bigger than normal. Subtract here. My b squareds go away, right? Because that turns that into plus, which knocks out that minus 25b squared. Let's see, it turns this minus into plus also. So I've got 2 plus 100. So I've got 102b. Drop down my next number, which is plus 408. And for the last time, put this one, 102b over b. So my b's will cancel. I'm just left with 102, positive 102. Multiply the 102 times both of these. 102 times b gives me 102b. 102 times 4 gives me positive 408. So again, no remainder. So your answer for the time is 5b squared minus 25b plus 102. Okay? All right, I'm going to stop the video and